So you think you know the Second World War, right? Britain toughing it out alone, America turning the tide, Russia pushing from the east. That's the story we all learned. Then you start digging, find some quiet Aussie thing, and bam, everything you thought you knew gets twisted. This isn't about battles or heroes nobody remembers. It's about 3 research boats, 147 folks, and a decision some suits made in Canberra back in '43. This decision might have changed the war, and not a shot was fired. The official story? Bare bones. The news back then didn't exist. And the people involved, the ones still around when the files started to open up in the '80s, clammed up for the most part. If they talked, they were real careful. I've been poking around this stuff for like 30 years. I keep coming back because what they aren't saying is louder than what's on paper. Okay, so here's what we know for sure. November '43, the Aussie government kicked off the Southwest Pacific Research Program. Sounded like basic ocean stuff. Mapping currents, checking out sea life, charting waters around Papua New Guinea, and nearby islands that never got charted before. It was run by some science council that later became CSIRO. The money came from both the Defense and External Affairs departments. But here's the weird part. It was super secret for a science gig. Restricted access, no press, and keep those findings to yourself. They got 3 boats, the HMAS Whyalla, a Navy ship that saw convoy action, HMAS Bunbury, another Navy ship, yanked from patrol off Western Australia. Then there was the Dampier, a pearling boat turned research vessel, renamed HMAS Investigator 2. All 3 had Navy guys and scientists on board. Top scientist, Dr. Malcolm Fraser, a sea geologist. No relation to the Prime Minister. His right-hand man was Leonard Huxley, a physicist and dad to journalist Paul Huxley. Paul wrote a bit about it in '91 for The Australian, but it got pulled after 2 days and never ran again. The boats left Sydney on November 18th, 1943. First stop was Townsville, then they headed to Port Moresby and east around New Britain and New Ireland. For a month and a half, the radio chatter was normal. Weather, locations, supply runs. Then, early January '44, things changed. Messages got shorter, more coded, reports went missing. On the 12th, the Investigator 2 sends a priority message straight to Navy HQ in Melbourne, skipping channels. Nobody knows what that message said. It's still locked up. What happened next? You can find it in ship logs, port records, and some letters that crew members wrote that showed up years later. The 3 boats didn't go back to Australia. Instead, they got sent, mid-mission, way out into the ocean, to a spot that wasn't even on the original plan. The coordinates put them way out, like 200 miles northeast of Rabaul. Super deep water. Nowhere near the action at the time. They chilled there for 11 days. 0 radio traffic. Like they went dark. When they started talking again on January 24th, they said survey done and asked to come back to Port Moresby for supplies and to swap out the crew. They got the go-ahead, docked in Port Moresby on January 28th. 2 days later, 22 people, scientists and Navy guys, were on a plane back to Australia. They were donezo. Some got desk jobs in Canberra. Dr. Fraser got put on leave and didn't go back to his university. He moved to Tasmania and taught at some small town high school. Died in '78. His papers went to the university, but the years 43 to 45? Gone. Water damage, they said. Trashed before donation. The ships kept doing the survey thing until July '44, with replacement crews and a new science boss. But something was off. Fewer urgent messages. Basic stuff. The program quietly wrapped up in September '44 and vanished by December. No report, no findings shared. CSIRO's history book doesn't even mention the Southwest Pacific Research Program. Now, I didn't expect this level of missing info. I get wartime secrets around battles, troops, spies, but this was a research trip. Even with secrets, there should be something. A summary, a budget. But it's like a whole chunk of history got erased and they've kept it that way for 80 years. This is where the people start to matter. In '89, Colin Hartley, a radio guy on the HMAS Bunbury, gave an interview to some local history nerds in Adelaide. It's on tape at the State Library of South Australia. Hartley was in his 70s, retired, not bound by any oaths. He was careful, but he talked. He called those 11 days in January 44 the strangest duty I ever pulled. Said the crew was locked down most of the time. Said the scientists worked day and night, hauling up weird gear he'd never seen. Instruments, sensors, a magnetometer thing but bigger, complex. He said the water was warm, unusually warm. He said there were lights below the surface at night, not glowing fish, something steady. Said one day, a scientist puked over the railing and just sat there for an hour, head in his hands. Hartley asked if he was okay. The scientist looked at him and said, "We shouldn't be here." Hartley's story lines up, at least partly, with a letter from 1947 by Lieutenant Commander Arthur Webb, an officer on the HMAS Whyalla. Webb wrote it to his brother, a lawyer in Melbourne. They found it in 2003 when cleaning out an estate. It was going to be auctioned, but they pulled it. A researcher from the War Memorial snapped a couple of pages before it disappeared. Webb writes that the January 44 thing was a matter I cannot discuss in any detail, even now, but which weighs on my conscience. He mentions objects retrieved from depth and how the implications were immediately recognized by Dr. Fraser and his team, and a decision was made at the highest level to contain all knowledge of the discovery. The discovery? What discovery? The books say nothing, the program shut down, personnel scattered. But hiding something takes effort. You don't silence 147 people over nothing. In '52, the US Navy did a secret thing called Project Magnet, mapping the Earth's magnetic field over the Pacific. They used planes with special gear. They ran it out of Guam for months. Logs from Project Magnet, opened up in '97, mention a spot northeast of Rabaul as a known anomaly, previously surveyed by Allied personnel. Avoid low-altitude passes. The coordinates, the same spot where the Aussie ships spent 11 days in January 44. The US Navy knew. They knew something was there, and they knew someone else had been there already. This is where it gets weird. If the Aussies found something big in early 44, something magnetic, something weird, why shut the program down 9 months later? Why not expand it? Why pull the main scientist and stick him in a teaching job? Why hide findings that could have helped win the war? Unless it wasn't that kind of war, unless what they found didn't fit the story. In '45, as the Pacific War was wrapping up, the Aussie government quietly funded another trip to the same area. Not a research program this time. Defence records called it Logistics and Salvage Assessment. The boat was HMAS Moresby, a survey ship. The crew, some civilian experts who never showed up anywhere else in defence records. The trip lasted 3 weeks. No report. HMAS Moresby got scrapped 6 months later. The captain retired in '46 and moved to Canada. Never came back. There's a pattern. Anyone who got close to whatever they found in January 44 either clammed up, left the country, or got stuck in a job where they couldn't ask questions. That's not random. That's damage control. I tried to match this up with stuff happening in the Pacific in '44. Any changes in Allied strategy that might tie into whatever they found in January? Yeah, but it's a stretch and you have to look at supplies, not battles. In February '44, right after the Aussie ships got back to Port Moresby, the US Navy started moving supply ships off a route they'd been using for months. The new routes added 3 days to the trip. No explanation. Commanders figured it was to avoid Japanese subs, but Japanese subs weren't even that active there by February '44. The change didn't make sense unless there was some other reason to avoid that spot. At the same time, Canberra and Washington started talking like crazy. Messages between the Aussie Department of External Affairs and the US State Department tripled between January and March '44. Most of it's still secret. We know that in April '44, a top Aussie diplomat, Sir Frederick Shedden, went to Washington for surprise meetings that the Aussie news didn't cover. Shedden was the head of the Department of Defense. His meetings, the Secretary of the Navy, the Director of the Office of Strategic Services, and someone from the Manhattan Project. That last bit only came out in 2009, when someone found Shedden's name in a visitor log? Why would the Aussie defence boss need to talk to Manhattan Project guys in April 44? Australia wasn't involved in atomic research back then. We didn't know the Manhattan Project even existed until after Hiroshima. Or maybe we did. Maybe something found in the water northeast of Rabaul in January. 44 needed some physics expertise beyond oceanography. Leonard Huxley, the science guy on the Southwest Pacific Research Program, was a physicist. He studied electromagnetic fields and radiation. Weird thing to bring on a marine survey. After the program shut down, Huxley went to the Australian National University before it officially existed. He worked in a research unit with no name and nothing published. He stayed there until 50, then went to the UK and joined their atomic energy program. He never talked about his work in the Pacific. His son, Paul Huxley, wrote in that old article that his dad once told him, "There are things I saw during the war that were not meant to be seen by anyone, and I've made peace with the fact that I'll never be allowed to speak about them." The article got pulled. Paul Huxley won't say why. I tried to reach him. Nothing. Here's something people don't talk about. In 47, the Aussie government set up the Long-Range Weapons Establishment at Woomera in South Australia. They tested rockets and did joint research with the UK, but the location had a weird need: access to anomalous geomagnetic data relevant to guidance system testing. That's from a 48 memo, opened up in 2002. Anomalous geomagnetic data. That's not normal for a rocket range. You need normal data to test rockets, unless you're testing something else, unless you're trying to figure out something that acts weird. By 50, Woomera was super secret joint US-UK Aussie stuff, controlled airspace, minimal access. And in the early research logs, partially declassified now, there are mentions of Project Remnant, a materials thing that ran from 49 to 53. The materials were retrieved samples, Pacific origin, high-density metallic composite, non-terrestrial formation characteristics. Non-terrestrial, that's what they said. Not foreign, not experimental, non-terrestrial. I stared at that document for hours the first time I saw it, trying to find another way to see it. There isn't one. The message is clear. The conclusion is unavoidable, but no follow-up, no sharing, no paper. Just a program that ran for 4 years and then vanished. In 54, the Aussie Security Intelligence Organisation looked at their wartime spy stuff. They were worried about Soviet spies, but they looked at all the secret programs from 39 to 45. The summary, opened up in 99, has one paragraph that jumps out. It says that certain scientific activities undertaken in the Southwest Pacific Theatre between 1943 and 1945 remain under restriction due to ongoing strategic sensitivity and the risk of adversarial interest. Personnel involved have been periodically rebriefed on non-disclosure obligations. Rebriefed. They were still alive in 54, still being handled, still a risk. Colin Hartley, the radio guy who gave that interview in 89, died in 95. His stuff went to the State Library of South Australia. In his stuff was a notebook he'd kept, daily entries, weather, and a sketch he drew on January 18, 1944. It showed a cylinder, tapered at one end, with ribs or seams running lengthwise. Next to it he wrote, "Pulled from 900 fathoms, no corrosion, no marine growth, cold to the touch." 900 fathoms is over 1,600 meters. That deep, in warm water, metal should be falling apart, unless it hadn't been there long, or unless it was made from something that doesn't fall apart. A researcher photographed the sketch in 2007. 3 months later, the notebook vanished. The library said it was returned to family at their request. The family says they didn't ask for it back. Nobody's seen it since. Zooming out, between 44 and 47, Allied folks in the Pacific reported an increase in weird stuff in the air and sea. Not just blurry sightings, radar tracks, underwater contacts that booked it faster than any sub, lights that stayed with planes and then blasted off. These reports are in Navy files, flight logs, patrol debriefs. Most got filed as unidentified and ignored, but the number went way up after January 44, and it was thickest in the waters northeast of Rabaul. I wasn't trying to connect these dots. I was looking at Aussie naval stuff. I found one weird thing. I chased it. I kept finding things that shouldn't be there, missing things that should exist, and silences that only make sense if someone's hiding something. The Australian War Memorial has over 200,000 documents about World War II. The Southwest Pacific Research Program? Mentioned in 7. No detail. The National Archives in Canberra have 14 files. 11 are still secret. The other 3 are supply orders and personnel moves. Nothing else. Just admin noise. In 2018, I asked for the rest to be opened up. Denied. National security and ongoing international obligations. Ongoing. 74 years later. What obligation lasts that long unless the original discovery still matters? There's a map, made in '46 by the Royal Australian Navy, that covers the waters around New Britain. The map has depths, currents, dangers, but there's a little spot northeast of Rabaul, about 20 miles across, marked survey incomplete, avoid anchoring, reported magnetic interference. That's been on every map since, for 78 years. No explanation, no update. Just a warning that something's weird there. I talked to 3 former Navy officers who served there in the 60s and 70s. They all said going through that area messed with their compasses and caused radio static. One guy, a navigator, said his ship's compass went haywire for 40 minutes in '71. He filed a report. Never heard back. Months later, they told him it was forwarded to technical assessment, and that was it. This isn't just talk. This is facts, repeatable, visible, and been in the navigation warnings for decades. But no public anything, just silence. Last time anyone asked questions about the Southwest Pacific Research Program was in 2004, when a historian named Dr. Evelyn Marsh sent a paper to the Australian Historical Studies Journal called Unexamined Expeditions, Scientific Activity and Strategic Secrecy in the Pacific, 1943 to 1945. It talked about the program, the January '44 thing, and the people who got reassigned. It got accepted. 2 weeks before printing, it got pulled, no reason given. She sent it to 2 other journals. Both said no without even looking at it. She dropped it. I called her in 2011. She wouldn't talk on record, but she said, "There are some things you're not supposed to look at even now, and when you do, people notice." People notice. That's what gets me. Not the documents, not the holes. The fact that after 80 years, asking about 3 research ships and 11 days in the Bismarck Sea still gets pushback, still gets files pulled, papers canned, and folks told to shut up. Whatever the Aussies found in January '44, it wasn't forgotten. It was hidden, classified, and made a part of a silence where people get killed. You'd only do that for generations, across different governments, if the truth still matters at any circumstances. Not to national whatever, but to something deeper. To what they don't want you to know about a war you think you understand.